You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
Alrighty, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Derek, and I'm joined, as always, by your co-hosts, Kevin and Alex. Gentlemen's, how we doing?
I'd start singing "We Are the Champions," but I don't feel like Tuesday night is appropriate to let my vocal debut take way. So anyway. Doing good, man. Doing good. It was an exciting weekend, right? It started for at least, for us, right? It started out and Friday, you thought Friday was going to be a kickoff of a great weekend. And then it turned out that Friday night kind of sucked. And then you had to wait. And then it closed in amazing fashion, right? So kind of the low, then the high of the weekend. But, here we are. And we're getting ready to saddle off an early happy birthday, America, because next time we see y'all, it will be past Liberty's birthday. So an early happy birthday to everybody, but super excited. A great show. Get to break down a couple more teams here tonight. So I'm ready to kick it off. How are y'all doing?
Boys, obviously if you've listened or tuned into the podcast, you've known that I've been distracted over the last couple months, especially if, when doing this podcast coincided with a particular hockey team that we all seem to love, that we do love. And if they happen to be playing in a playoff game, quite distracted was I. I can say that distraction has gone away thanks to the Colorado Avalanche hoisting the Stanley Cup for the first time since I was a young, since we were all young bucks, really. We waited 21 years for that to happen, and it was.
How young were you, Alex? Because you were the baby of the group of us, right?
But I'm like a year younger than you two. I was in.
Well, if you're a year younger, Kevin, then you're more than that on me. I'm just gonna throw that out there.
That's fair.
Derek's got me by a year and a half.
I was. Hold on. I'm still bad at math. What was I? 10. 98, 13? 13?
That's not bad.
21 years? I should have just done that math.
Sock.
All right, let's get into fantasy football, shall we?
And then there was that. Way to do that one.
I was going to slide that in there.
Yeah, we saw that. Yep. All right, couple of comments coming in. The Stacks app saying ready to talk some football with the boys. The Stacks app is a great place to get down and talk to all sorts of sports. So, if you haven't checked it out, download the app and do that. They've got a question. We'll get to this one later on. Will Pittsburgh be more efficient on the offensive side of the ball this year? Pittsburgh is actually the second team up that we have this show, so make sure you stay tuned. Leadership lessons saying earlier they don't want any part of the Eagles running back room. And Competitive Hedge podcast. Kenny chiming in there. Kenneth's chiming in here. Two handsome guys and Derek have a great show.
Hey, I like this guy.
Competitive Hedge.
Yeah.
Big fans over here. Big fans.
Yeah. So.
I didn't put two and two together until just now because we kind of individualize how we do these things. But this is our Pennsylvania tour episode, if you will.
Yes.
This is our Pennsylvania tour.
Yes.
Which isn't good for really for Pennsylvania football fans because we're still kind of in the mediocrity of finishes last year. So, not a great year. I guess one of them was a playoff team, right? So
yeah,
that helps.
We're finally starting to get out of early draft picks into last place or last team to make it into the playoffs type of realm. We've made it thus far, so
it's crazy. We are halfway through our team breakdowns.
They're trucking along.
Yep.
Good night.
And of course, we've got a lot more really good content coming your way. We got a lot more teams to break down. We'll start getting into the draft strategies, the tiers, all of those coming up here. As we start getting ready for redraft season kicking off here very, very shortly. Make sure that you are tuning into the socials: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok at Good Old Boys FF. As well as do us a big favor, head over to the YouTube channel, click the subscribe button. One of the best ways to support this independent podcast is subscribing to the YouTube channel. We do all this content for you for free, and we're happy to do it for you. Just ask that you hook us up with a subscribe on one of those places there so that you're getting the content. Alrighty, guys. So we're going to start with the old Philadelphia Eagles. And the Eagles last year finished 9-8. They were 53% pass, 47% run ratio, 12th in points for, 14th in yards for. Head coach Nick Sirianni, offensive coordinator Shane Steichen. And we'll start in the running back room where we always do. Miles Sanders finished running back 44, 137 rush attempts, 754 yards, 0 touchdowns. On the ground, 26 receptions, 34 targets, 158 yards through the air, and 0 touchdowns through the air. Thoughts on Miles Sanders?
So Miles Sanders missed 5 games last year, which led to this 44 performance. So to be fair for a Miles Sanders and the way that the Eagles seemingly were really happy going RBBC, especially after about week 5 and kind of realizing that, hey, between what Jalen Hurts does, splash of Miles Sanders, you had Kenneth Gainwell, a little bit of Boston Scott. I don't know that I'd be super excited with Miles Sanders being my third running back, but I think I could live with that if he's able to play the full slate of games. Like, I think he finishes above RB 36. So as a third running back, you're not losing your hat on there. That being said, Jalen Hurts is kind of, it's not that he's RB1, but he is RB1 because he controls that RPO. Sorry, a lot of acronyms going on here, guys. But because he's controlling all that, he is fleet of foot, very good moving in and out of the pocket, dangerous when moving out of the pocket. And they rotate that door so seamlessly. It does create a problem in being able to bank on a running back in any given week. That being said, I think Miles Sanders he's arguably the best pass catcher on that team as far as the running backs go. Kenneth Gainwell's pretty good, right? Coming out of Memphis, Gainwell caught a lot of balls. So he's pretty good there as well. I'm guessing I'd probably pass on Sanders and grab Gainwell later is kind of what I'm thinking, right? As far as value, and take a significant round discount that Kenneth Gainwell is going at, right? Because Miles Sanders is still going rounds, 5, 6, somewhere in that neighborhood at times. You might be able to get him to slip down into the 7th, but Gainwell is going almost 7 rounds later in most drafts that I've been a part of. So I think I'll take the value there for a guy who's probably going to finish in the 40s as far as running back territory goes. But it's just not a sexy running back room for me. They're productive, but they're so productive and interchangeable that it's like a Patriots backfield almost, where it's hard to pin one guy down. So why would I want to be married to one when I could pivot, go some different direction, and probably be better off and happier in the long run because of it?
Yeah, not only did Miles Sanders miss 5 games, he also missed getting in the end zone. Like, he had 0 touchdowns, and that's a significant part. I mean, he gets a couple touchdowns, and all of a sudden, he's not really RB 44. He kind of moves up a little bit there. So, a couple touchdowns goes a long way, especially if you're down there in that, running back 44 range. So will he get in the end zone? You'd have to think that was an anomaly, right? I mean, granted, in his 2 seasons, he had 3 touchdowns, and then he had 6 touchdowns before last year, and then last year, obviously, the 0 touchdowns. So that's a bit of a concern, right? And this Eagles running back room, and I know we're still talking about Miles Sanders. We'll kind of get into Kenneth Gainwell here, but this Eagles running back room is the classic case of good for real football, horrible for fantasy football. Like, you just don't know which guy is going to be the one that they call upon, and it'll be there will be times where it is multiple guys in one game, and while collectively they put up really good numbers, individually, which is what we are concerned about, obviously, it is a crapshoot. It's trying to figure out which one is going to be, the one. So, leadership lessons there, their comment right off the top of the show there. I don't want any part of this Philadelphia Eagles running back room. I'm right there with you. Like, I think this is a room that, if I have options And I'm up against, do I take Miles Sanders or do I take who else is going around Miles right now? Derek, do you have that right offhand?
Well, Miles Sanders right now is the 87th pick off the board. Guys going in that 87th range would be 71 off the board right now, kind of overall. So you got guys, Cortland Sutton, Brandon Cooks. Surprisingly, Jalen Hurts is the pick like right after Miles Sanders.
Honestly, that's not that surprising if we're being real, because of how productive he really is as their leading rusher and leading passer, obviously. But what running? Do you see any running backs around there that are?
Yeah, so he's running back 28th off the board, which AJ Dillon is RB 27 at right around the 60th pick off the board, and going beyond that down to running back 29 would be it's a pretty good drop there. Kareem Hunt, Devin Singletary, down there in the 80s as far as the round goes.
So I guess what the point that I'll make here is, based on all of that, is obviously there's significant drop between where those running backs are going between 60. You're talking a 20 pick range there. So obviously, these running backs aren't going right at that time. So if you're faced with the fact that I need a running back here in the 6th, 7th round, whatever that is, look receiver, because there is a pretty significant drop off. And to Kevin's point earlier, you can be okay and get a running back later, and then you haven't invested the draft capital in it, so it's not as bad, and you can maybe have an upgrade or a positional advantage at wide receiver, or heck, if you want to go, if you're in a single QB league, that wouldn't be a horrible time to take a Jalen Hurts or a Patrick Mahomes, to solidify your quarterback spot there and get that out of the way, because it's just hard. It's, you're throwing darts at that point to figure out if you're going to take a Philadelphia running back. You're throwing darts at which one is going to be the one. And again, I just don't think that there's any value or the headache that you have each week trying to figure out, oh, please let this be the week that Miles Sanders falls into the end zone, or please let this be the week that Kenneth Gainwell falls in the end zone. Or, for the love of God, make sure Jalen Hurts actually hands the ball off once in one of these RPOs and doesn't just take it himself. So I agree with leadership lessons. I am going to kind of steer clear of this Philadelphia Eagles running back room, and the only way that I'm going to draft is break glass in case of emergency. If for whatever reason the draft has gotten wildly out of hand for me, then I would look at it. But even still, it would take the full time to convince myself, however much time I have to pick, to convince myself to go with an Eagles running back.
Yeah, again, Miles Sanders pretty much a hard pass for me with his ADP right around pick 71. That puts him right at the very end of the 6th round there, like the 6'11", 6'12", kind of in that range there. And there's a lot of wide receivers I'd rather take in that range there than try and go after Miles Sanders on this one. Interestingly enough, when you look at it, and this was what I was talking with Kevin a little bit before we went on the air here, but the Eagles were a predominantly run-heavy team last year. I actually missed that on the graphic earlier. They had a 53% run, 47% pass ratio, so an even heavier run ratio there than what the graphic originally showed. But that being the case, none of these running backs were really viable for you in fantasy. And, last year, had you taken Miles Sanders, you had to take him right around pick 39. So, very much in the kind of that 4th round there. And, that was a pick that didn't pan out for you, right? Because you were having to put him on there as your 2nd, maybe your 3rd RB. Even in this case where you're talking about a depth type of play in a late 6th round type of pickup there, again, there's a lot of wide receivers I'd rather have, right? Cortland Sutton's going kind of right in that range. He's a guy that we talked about already when we covered the Broncos, but he's a guy I'd far rather have on that. Brandon Cooks is also going around that same range. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Allen Robinson, Adam Thielen, all of those guys going right and around that same type of pick. And those are all guys that I would rather go that route. So I am going to be out on Miles Sanders. And Alex, you mentioned it earlier that if he'd gotten in the end zone type of thing. So I went and I did some math on that, and say he went out and got like 5, 6 touchdowns. Call it 6, right? That puts him moving the dial from being the 44th to like running back 29 type of thing. Like, it moves him up, but it doesn't even get him up into running back 2 territory. So again, I think that what we saw last year is what we're going to see kind of play out again this year. The Eagles making some investments in some other positional rooms there as well, lead me to believe, in some of the reports coming out, seeing that Jalen has improved his throwing motion and his accuracy component there as well. And some of the other moves leads me to believe that they're going to go a little bit more pass side of things. And when the run happens, it's still going to be Jalen Hurts moving and grooving. And on that scenario, I really don't want Miles Sanders on my roster there.
And that 6 touchdown would be a career high, obviously small sample, right? So 6 touchdowns would be a career high for Miles Sanders. I think there was a lot of recency bias. There was a lot of, this team's going to have to run the ball because you don't trust Jalen Hurts' right arm. But just turns out that it's Jalen Hurts' legs that are running the football, and that's it.
Right. So, yeah, I'm with you. I'm out on Miles Sanders. Kenneth Gainwell was another running back option there in Philadelphia. Kenneth Gainwell finished RB 55 last year, 56 rush attempts, 213 yards, 4 touchdowns, 29 receptions, 43 targets, 244 yards, and 1 touchdown. Thoughts on Kenneth Gainwell?
Kind of like I alluded to when we were talking about Sanders, is if I will take Gainwell because of the discount I get there, right? I don't see there being enough of a difference between the two of them and how I see the Eagles offense kind of being implemented between the running backs, and we'll talk about this when we start getting into draft strategies, right? But when 2 running backs are so close like this and you feel like it's 1A and 1B, take the value. Where is the value going to be? And in this instance, it's with Kenneth Gainwell, right? He catches the ball in the backfield, 5 touchdowns. I mean, so he had a nose for the end zone with this offense. And I don't see there being any real reason why that stat line doesn't really change, right? If this offense becomes a little bit more efficient in its ability to stay on the field, even if they are throwing the ball a little bit more, staying on the field longer, more plays ran, time of possession, maybe towards the end of the game, you're kind of bleeding the clock off towards the end and letting it rust on your defense. All those things kind of lean towards slightly better statistical outputs for the running back in most cases, not all, but most. So with that, I would rather take a flyer in mid to late rounds on Kenneth Gainwell than going early to mid rounds on Miles Sanders.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's, again, because of where you're getting him, obviously the expectation is, not as high as where you were taking Miles Sanders last year, and obviously that's fallen. But I'd still, there's just so many mouths there, and obviously the big one is Jalen Hurts. 56 rush attempts is just, that's nothing. What Derrick Henry had that by the 3rd play of week 3, right? Like, that's it. When it comes to running backs, like, that's where you're at with just his volume, and yeah, he got some work in the pass game and everything, but man, it's just so hard to figure out. So I guess if I am going to take an Eagles running back, it is going to be on one that is at a discount, and one where I don't have super high hopes, and I'm not resting my season on whether or not that guy has a good week in and week out.
Yeah, you're not kidding. So Kenneth Gainwell actually was, it was a weird type of thing when they did that, right? When Miles Sanders went down, you thought Kenneth Gainwell was the next guy up and would be the guy that kind of shoulder the load and do that. And they went in a different direction yet again, right? So it was one of those, like, Kenneth Gainwell's kind of our guy, and he's mixing it up really well. And turns out that, it really wasn't. And they started bringing Jordan Howard in, Boston Scott in to have a lot of snap count, a lot of running the ball, and and Kenneth Gainwell kind of faded off there, and then made kind of a resurgence. A little bit later on when you saw Miles Sanders come back in. So kind of a weird way that they were running that, where they almost had two different running back by committees, and whoever the primary first and second down kind of guy is. And then we've got a guy that we're going to have run out on third down if he's the guy. And like, it was just kind of this weird dynamic when you'd watch the Eagles play last year. And, for everything that we've said before and what you guys just said there, as far as Jalen Hurts goes, again, I'm going to be fairly out on Kenneth Gainwell. I will probably get him in a couple of spots, just from the standpoint, he is kind of a dynamic playmaker and can do some things and get into the end zone, like him for a best ball type of candidate there. He is coming off the board right around 158, 159 off the board there. So that puts him late into the draft process. And you're talking in most cases being able to pick him up with the last pick of a traditional draft and kind of a dart throw. And that's not a bad place to do it, to get a guy there and see if he can, do some things there. Cause he does have the ability to go out there and kind of, perform at a weekly advantage type of player there. Any other thoughts on the running back room? Alrighty, let's go ahead and head on over into the wide receiver room. And we're going to start with A.J. Brown, wide receiver 31 last year, 63 receptions, 105 targets, 869 yards, 5 touchdowns, 20.08% of the target share last year on Tennessee, with him coming over on that draft day trade. Guys, thoughts on A.J. Brown?
Good Lord. I like the player, right? I am still hesitant on the situation in Philly. Now, that being said, I could, in the right situation, I could take A.J. Brown as my second wide receiver. And I think I could find a way to make that work. I'd be pretty happy with it. But, right after the trade, you saw him slip a little bit, right? Guys instantly kind of balked at it, going, well, what are we going to do here? We don't really like this. And now he's starting to creep back up the draft boards here a little bit. So by the time our home league drafts, there's a good chance he's going to be too rich for my blood. But if for whatever reason he happens to fall and I can pick him up as my second wide receiver, I will be happy with that in most cases. My biggest fear or hesitation should be just sheer volume. Like, how many targets do we really expect A.J. Brown to have this year, right? You still have oh my goodness,
DeVonta Smith,
Jalen
Reagor,
and Reagor out there, yeah, and
Goedert.
So there's still some things I'm worried about, but flyer, yes. Best ball, absolutely. I do like him a lot in best ball leagues. Redrafts, the consistency scares me a little bit.
Yeah, this one's interesting because he comes from an offense that was run first, right? That obviously used the run to set up the pass, and not that Ryan Tannehill is a world beater by any means, but he was efficient in what he did, and I think that's the big difference here is that Tannehill was efficient, and Jalen Hurts through the air isn't all that efficient. So if the reports are true that Jalen Hurts has retooled his throwing motion, his accuracy is going to come up, which that accuracy needs to come up because it was right at 61 and some change last year.
61.3.
Yeah, so that to me is where the question marks come in, because he had good receivers to throw to. It's just and I didn't watch nearly as much Eagles film as I'm sure a lot of people did, but is Jalen Hurts going to be a 1-read, 2-read, take off and run quarterback again this year? Is that how it's going to be? Our defense is going to be able to, take away his passing options and then force Jalen Hurts to have to beat you on the ground. I mean, it's an interesting way that you're going to have to play them. So I don't know that I'm entirely sold on an AJ Brown either. I don't know that the move over did him any favors in terms of his fantasy value, but I guess I will be slightly. I would lean towards no when I'm picking an AJ Brown. Is there. I will definitely be exploring other options and could probably talk myself into something else that I'm a little bit more comfortable with because it's a position that is dependent upon the quarterback, and what I've seen so far out of the quarterback is, my option, the amount of times that he's going to be throwing the football accurately isn't it what I would like.
Yeah, I can definitely see exactly what you guys are saying there, right? AJ Brown is the 27th off the board as far as ADP goes. Wide receiver 10 right now in half point PPR. ADP right now, and that is definitely too rich for my blood. I don't know that he's going to be able to return wide receiver 10 or better value, especially on this Eagles team. And when you're talking 27th, you're talking an early third rounder. So the way I construct teams, that's typically going to be my very first wide receiver I put on my team. And I want a wide receiver that is going to give me a little bit more consistency, that is going to still have some of the ceiling that he has, but provide me a little bit better floor there as well. So when you look at it, too, AJ Brown has yet to play a full season in the NFL, right? Yet to play a full 17-game slate. And he is not, you typically don't hear him brought up in that conversation about, the wide receivers that are health adverse, health resistant type of thing. You generally don't hear him mentioning that. However, he seems to miss, 5 games or more every season so far. And that's just, again, I want a guy that's going to be on my roster, going to start, going to play. Here's a question for the group. Would you rather have AJ Brown, T. Higgins, Diontae Johnson? Out of those wide receivers, you gotta pick one to draft. Who you taking?
Diontae. Hold on. Still Diontae.
Still Diontae, huh?
Yeah.
The only reason Deontay's out because of the quarterback situation.
Yeah, I know, and that's
right?
The question.
Maybe Trubisky can do that. I think that ball's going to get spread around a little bit more than what we've seen in years past between Claypool, Johnson, and Pickens. So, man, I think if it came down to it, I want the true alpha, and I do think A.J. Brown at this point is the true alpha, even with DeVonta Smith having a pretty strong rookie campaign. So I'm going to say A.J. Brown at that point, but I'm probably not going to be overly excited about it.
So, reason I brought up those 3 names is AJ Brown, 27th off the board right now. T. Higgins, 32nd off the board, so there's a 5-pick discount there. But Diontae Johnson is just about a 12 pick difference there, so you get him a full round later on that one. So just very interesting, right? There's also some guys that I would rather go with over AJ Brown in that similar type of draft position. Mike Evans going the pick right before him on average, and Keenan Allen going 2 picks after him. I would rather have both AJ Brown and Keenan Allen on my roster than going with an AJ Brown there. AJ Brown also, when you look at it, is scoring his touchdowns on deep pass attempts. So you're relying heavily on him to catch the ball and break one for 20 yards. And the reason I say 20 or more yards is because last year, 0 touchdowns came from pass attempts in the red zone to him. Every one of his touchdowns, all 5 of them being attempted from outside the red zone. So while he is a big target there, I don't know that you're going to see him necessarily put up the touchdowns that route. A couple of comments coming in here. Let's get to those before we head on over to the rest of the wide receiver room. Peng's Picks chiming in saying, my biggest issue with A.J. Brown is his slow starts. I'm wondering if he starts slow again. Peng's Picks, you're right. Like he 2 seasons ago, he missed several games to start off that season. Last year started off slow. Weeks 5 through 9, he was actually the wide receiver 5 on those weeks there, or for that cumulative quarter of the season. So you're right, he has started a little bit slow. Bogart Scott Free from the GMM Network chiming, what's good? Derek, fantasy football, give me money. The Eagles had 420 pass attempts total last season. A.J. Brown is the only game in town. They got Dallas Goedert as well as the swim reaper. And you need Jalen Hurts to pass for over 530 attempts as a floor for me to be comfortable with where A.J. Brown is being drafted. And Peng's Picks chiming back in saying Darnold was absolutely poo-poo last year and Moore still had 1150 yards. You're right. We did cover the Carolina just a little bit ago, Peng's Pick, and part of DJ Moore getting to 1100 yards had very much to do with the fact that he also saw like 165, 170 targets. AJ Brown is not going to see that kind of volume at the most. I've got to give the ceiling for the most targets that I think A.J. Brown sees at about 115 to 120. And I think that is me being way, way too generous on that one. Any other thoughts on any of the comments coming in or A.J. Brown?
No, he's kind of a polarizing player this year, right? And it's no fault of his necessarily. It's just how we view him within the fantasy community, right? Like, he didn't hold out, so that's not the problem. He's reporting he got traded. I mean, that's what it was. It just he didn't go from, a run first team to a pass happy team like Kansas City or Green Bay, right? If he would have gone to Kansas City or Green Bay, he'd probably be the 5th wide receiver off the board.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you'd probably have Kupp, you'd have Jefferson, you'd have Jamar Chase, and then you could even argue A.J. Brown would be number 4. And then you kind of go into everything else. But it's the style of offense. It's the fact that he is big play. So it's interesting to see how people view him because he's just a little polarizing based off of how you feel his skill set translates to on the field in a run-first offense.
Yeah, absolutely. All righty, let's go ahead and head on over into DeVonta Smith. DeVonta Smith was wide receiver 32 last year, 61 receptions, 100 targets, 875 yards, 5 touchdowns, 22.32% target share. Thoughts on DeVonta Smith?
I like DeVonta Smith. I think he actually improves upon his ranking from last year. I think A.J. Brown helps him with that because safeties are going to have to respect his ability to get deep and break tackles and kind of, do some different things. So I think that opens up on top of the fact that DeVonta Smith is he's in a year deep into the league, right? He understands how to prepare. He understands some of the chemistry with Jalen Hurts. It's the exact same offense. So, that learning curve is a little bit easier for him coming into year 2. So a very clean route runner, very shifty, can run those underneath routes and play a security type blanket for Jalen Hurts. I know they have Dallas Goedert, but DeVonta Smith can kind of do that outside the numbers for him as well. So I like Smith. Again, I like Smith as like my 3rd wide receiver though. And the thing is, Smith or Waddle, right? Like that's kind of the toss-up right now, Smith or Waddle. And again, it's, do you trust the quarterback? Do you not trust the quarterback? Everything that's going on in that situation. So, I think that'd be a good debate just to see what people's views on that are. But third wide receiver in my roster, I'm okay with that. Get a little piece of it. You get the value, right? A bit of a discount that's not wide receiver 10 off the board. You can get some upside in there for the rapport, and you kind of move on, and you're playing a little bit more of the matchup, right? He's not a set it and forget it guy.
Yeah, that's. I think he is the real winner in the trade because how teams are going to have to play, this pass game now. How they're going to have to defend and make sure that AJ Brown doesn't beat them, and so now they kind of have those two not similar, but they're dissimilar type receivers, AJ Brown and DeVonta Smith. So that to me is the big beneficial. Excuse me, the big benefactor in this. So. I like him too in the discount. If you're going to get a piece, this is the piece that I would get. Unfortunately, there's a lot of good receivers that you could probably go elsewhere too on teams with a more reliable passing game. But he is the guy that if I'm gonna if it's not going to be Dallas Goedert, if I'm not going tight end, then he's probably the one guy that I'm like okay with having on my roster from the Eagles.
Yeah. And where he's coming off
or
the
Jalen
board.
Hurts, obviously. Sorry.
Yes, of course. And where he's coming off the board at, I kind of like, right? He's coming off the board 84th overall. That puts him right at the back of the 7th, top of the 8th type of round, and really kind of like that position for him. Unfortunately, I don't know that I'll necessarily be looking his way come draft time just because of some of the other players around him, but the value is certainly there for him, and the value is kind of baked in. He's coming off the board, wide receiver 34 overall. I think that he can outperform that, and I finished that at worst. You're trying to draft on the floor there, and I think you could probably have him potentially sneak up in that fringe wide receiver 2 area when it's all said and done this year. So I kind of like that. But players going similarly as far as draft position goes. Darnell Mooney's coming off the board kind of right before him. Juju Smith-Schuster coming off the board right behind him. Gabriel Davis coming off the board right behind him as well. So guys, kind of 4 wide receivers there, all with the same draft position type of thing. Pick your poison.
I'm going Mooney 1, Smith 2, Gabe Davis 3, and Juju 4. I am not a believer in Juju this year at all.
That's funny. I actually I am a little bit more of a believer, I guess, in Juju. So I would go Mooney 1, Smith-Schuster 2, Smith 3, and the 4th.
Gabe Davis would be your 4th then.
Yeah.
Kevin,
Here's
I'm
my
kind
hot
of on your
take, and we can write this down. Juju Smith-Schuster finishes outside of wide receiver 40 this year.
Okay.
Earn it.
So that. All right. We'll mark that one down. I like it. That is a bold take, but it's one that I can absolutely see coming to fruition. For me, I've got to take Darnell Mooney because of the fact that he's going to see the massive amount of volume there. And then it's kind of a toss-up between DeVonta Smith and Gabe Davis for me. Right there, right? I think that Gabe Davis has the better passing situation. I think DeVonta Smith probably sees more targets when it's all said and done. So it's kind of a volume versus, getting that piece type of thing that we talk about there. And it really kind of comes to play there. Let's go ahead, and we do have a couple of questions before we head on over to our last wide receiver on the room here. So Peng's pick saying Darnold only had 2,300 yards thrown, barely 3,000 yards total from the Panthers QB. Yep, that room was just bad last year. You think that he thinks that Hurts can get like 3,600 to 4,000 yards if he can actually begins throwing 4K ain't hard anymore. And he asked, does Hunter Renfrow rank higher than any of the guys that we just listed there? So would you rank Hunter Renfrow higher than Darnell Mooney, DeVonta Smith, Juju Smith-Schuster, or Gabe Davis?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's not going that high, so I can play the value card.
Yeah, that I'm Hunter Renfrow is like that sneaky assassin type player where you get him real late, and
actually Hunter actually right now with Hunter Renfro's ADP, that puts him coming off the board at 79.80 right now is kind of the average in half-point PPR scoring, 31st wide receiver taken. So he's actually coming off the board sooner than Mooney, DeVonta Smith, Juju, or Gabe Davis.
Oh, see, people are paying attention because Renfro was very, very productive last year. I still think he's higher than all of those guys. Yeah.
I would move him
he
down.
might be the one who could do it just because that true alpha, right? Like, there are a lot of targets that Renfro got because of Darren Waller being injured, the Ruggs situation, and now that you bring in Devontae Adams, he commands so much attention. Like, I do think Renfro is going to be a very good wide receiver component this year. I think his efficiencies could be through the chart. But I think I would take Mooney over him just off of sheer volume, just the opportunities to do something with the ball. I think I'd take Mooney before him, but absolutely I would take Renfro. I think I would take Renfro above the rest of these guys. So Mooney, Renfro, then the rest is how I would rank it.
Okay. And he says by hired, he means do we expect him to outperform those guys? So rank it in terms of how you think the fantasy finish will go there. Who has the highest, right? So rank it 1 through 5 between Hunter Renfro, Darnell Mooney, DeVonta Smith, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Gabriel Davis.
Mooney 1, Renfro 2. Davis and Smith I kind of have in that toss-up 3-4, and I'm okay either way. Kind of a 1A and 1B type situation in there. And then Juju's way down the list. Like I said, outside of wide receiver like 40, I don't have any love for Juju this year.
I would maintain my original rankings and just put Renfro at the top of that list.
Yeah, I think Renfro is going to have a big regression this year. I'll be the outlier and just and say what's on my mind here. I do think that you're going to see Hunter Renfro take a pretty good regression when this thing's all said and done. So the games that Darren Waller and Hunter Renfro have both started in, Hunter Renfro takes a major backseat. They both dominate the similar type of throws, similar target area, similar depth of target. So I am not going to, Darren Waller will get the 120, 130 targets. I think you'll see Hunter Renfro fall back down there towards probably 80, maybe 90 targets on the heavy side of the workload there. And that's going to put a serious damper in there. Plus the fact where you saw him finish last year was because of 9 touchdowns. Again, with Devontae Adams in town, Darren Waller in town. When they get down in the red zone, he's third at best as far as getting red zone looks, getting touchdown type of passing looks to it. So I'm not buying it. I'll rank it Darnell Mooney, basically put him above Juju Smith-Schuster for me. Is I think about where I've got that.
Yeah. Now, that's very sound logic. I would argue, for the sake of it, that with McDaniels coming in a different coaching regime, they understand how to use both a slot receiver and a tight end. McDaniels does much better than Gruden did. So I don't know that you're going to see all of the cannibalization. I want to make sure I use my word correctly. Right. That we're thinking about, just because for all the jokes we have about McDaniels and the way that he kind of yoked up the Denver, franchise there for a little while, he does have a proven track record on how to handle that type of positional advantage because of his time in New England and the Wes Welkers and the Danny Amendolas and the Gronks. And not that Derek Carr is Tom Brady, I'm not saying that, but the only thing that this Raiders team has that's any different is Devontae Adams compared to what a lot of those Patriot teams had outside of Randy Moss that, for that 1 year.
Any other thoughts there, Alex?
No.
All Alrighty. Peng's Pick chiming in saying that he sees Renfro is at the 10 yards per catch, meaning you'll have to expect him to catch 100 catches to get to 1K yards. Yeah, that is how that math would certainly work out there. I don't see him getting more than about 85 targets this year. I just don't see it happening.
I'll take it.
I do have something, because I do think the same exact thing, the same exact logic that we're applying to DeVonta Smith here with AJ Brown coming over, right? Defenses are going to have to take away options. Right. And so you're going to take away option A, which is Davante Adams. You're going to take away the option B, which is Darren Waller. You're at least going to try, right? You're going to try to take away those options. And if nothing else, you're going to make it harder. In the NFL, good quarterbacks go with the path of least resistance, and they rely on those guys that are the path of least resistance. And sometimes path of least resistance isn't a very good player. Hunter Renfrow is. So that's where I think, he is a benefactor. He's the benefactor of the fact that Davante Adams is there. He's a benefactor of the fact that Darren Waller will be in the lineup. And I understand, that he was the benefactor without those guys, right? Obviously, Davante wasn't there last year, but with Waller out, and the Ruggs situation, I just think that it benefits him. It benefits him in a way that, maybe he doesn't get, the 100 targets. Maybe that's not it. But what he will see will be quality, because defenses will be so focused on those other guys and making sure that they don't beat them, right? You just try to take away options. Hunter Renfrow is the option that will likely be the path of least resistance for Derek Carr.
You could be right. I'm just kind of reverse engineering this on my in my head as we kind of go through, right? The Las Vegas Raiders threw the ball about 600 times last year, which was good for about a 60% passing ratio. I don't see that necessarily improving or decreasing. I think that's probably pretty close to the watermark on this thing. Give me a plus or minus 3 either way, right? Like somewhere between 57, 63, which again, that's going to put them roughly in the same type of realm there as far as total number of passing plays out there. Davante Adams, I think, easily commands 150 targets in there. I think that you're going to see Darren Waller command somewhere around about 130 to 140 targets in there. We're already talking half of the target share going to those two guys right there. Running backs will typically chew up anywhere from 100 to 150 on that. And then you kind of split that up amongst the rest of the wide receiving core there. And when it's all said and done, I think you see Hunter Renfrow 85 type of targets. So I see where you guys are going on that one. I can't get there. I just can't. So
back to the task at hand. Let's get back to the Eagles.
Last comment here, and then we'll go on into Quez Watkins. But Derek Carr also had an all-time passing attempt of 620. I think it's interesting. He chimes down too. So yeah, Peng's Pick, you just said it there too. We're on the same page as far as that one goes. So we'll see. Time will tell. And, maybe we'll get into some sort of, side conversation about the Hunter Renfrow finish there amongst the other guys there. All right, let's go ahead and head over to Quez Watkins. Quez Watkins finished wide receiver 74, 38 receptions, 55 targets, 563 yards, 0 TDs, 13% target share. Thoughts on Quez Watkins?
Not drafted him. Pass.
Hard pass. Moving right along into the tight end room. Dallas Goedert finished tight end 10 last year, 56 receptions, 76 targets, 830 yards, 4 touchdowns, 16.31% target share. Thoughts on Dallas Goedert?
I like Goedert. He's a guy that I'm targeting. Just kind of if I'm not getting involved in that first wave of tight ends, right? Like he's a guy that is kind of at the beginning of that third wave almost, if you will. So he's a guy that I do kind of have a big circle next to him to just kind of check my roster, right? When he's coming up and I'm coming up on the draft board, making sure I like the mix of my team. He's a guy that I do have circled. I think that he is a good security blanket for Jalen Hurts. I think that he can fall into the end zone. I think the pressure of teams having to, again, keep an eye on AJ Brown. Obviously you have DeVonta Smith kind of cutting across some of that. So I do think he's going to see some more open, easy targets this year. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him back up into that, tight end 6, right? Like, and there's a little bit of value there. I don't see him finishing much higher than that, just based off of I think the limited passing attempts that are going to be going on in this offense. But if the efficiency's there, that's how he makes up for it. So you can get him about tight end 10, have a tight end 6 finish, built-in value there in a position group that is really hard to pin down anyway, outside of, the top 4 or 5, keynote tight ends. It's a hard position to pin down. And I think he's a guy that you can draft and play week in and week out and be able to live with what you get for the most part.
It's funny because tight end 10 feels like, walk with me here, tight end 10 feels low for Dallas Goedert, but it also feels right for Dallas Goedert. Like it just seems like, that's right about where he should be. But it also feels like he could have, he could get up into that tight end 6 that, just outside of those, elite premier tight ends in the league. So like he has the ability to, but I feel like tight end 10 is more of a, logical place for where he does end up finishing, similar to what he had last year. So it just depends on like Kevin, like you said, where you're at in the draft when his name is starting to come up, where the tight end runs have gone in your league. But he's definitely a guy, he's one that I have also been targeting a lot and have since he got into the league as a guy that I thought would do good things. And he's, for the most part, he has delivered on, kind of what we thought he was going to be. First, it was opposite of Zach Ertz, and now Ertz is out of the equation. So now he's the show in town. So he is, if nothing else, he has delivered on expectations, which is really all you can ask for anybody that you draft, is that they deliver on expectations.
I like where he's coming off the board right now, right? Pick 72 overall, the 8th tight end off the board. So that puts him very back of the 6th round, early 7th round type of capital there. Tight end 8, I think you're drafting the floor right there. He can return more than that, but I don't think he's going to really do worse than that for you, barring an injury. And quite frankly, I like the fact that this is a set it and forget it type of tight end there. A guy that you can take in the middle rounds type of thing, and you've got just a week in, week out performer. So I like that quality in a tight end where I don't have to really put a lot of extra work in to try and stream it, things like that. I didn't have to really spend a very high draft capital on a guy to do that either. So it kind of falls in that sweet spot for me as far as tight ends go. And I like Dallas Goedert at that draft position. Let's go ahead and head on into the quarterback room. Jalen Hurts, QB number 8 last year, 265 completions, 560 attempts, 61.3% completion percentage, 3,144 yards, 16 TDs, 9 interceptions, 139 rush attempts, 784 yards, and 10 rushing touchdowns. Thoughts on Jalen Hurts?
I like this finish for Jalen Hurts. Now, I do think his statistics this year are going to be shuffled up a little bit, right? I don't know that we see as many rushing touchdowns. Maybe we see a few less rushing yards, but I do expect the efficiency in the passing game to go up, right? So instead of 16, if he can get to 24 touchdowns through the air, a few more yards. So instead of 31, if you can get up to that 3,800 mark, I do think it balances itself out that way. Obviously, still a threat on the ground with his legs, so he's an exciting player to have on your roster, right? Like, he's a guy not quite like Lamar Jackson, but he is a guy that when he's on your roster, if you're trailing, you feel like you always have a chance to catch up, right? And just kind of watch the magic happen. So I like him because he's a fun guy to have on my roster. I have him in a couple different places, and I'm perfectly okay with him being my QB1. Depending on how your super flex starts out, I've seen teams where he's their QB2, right? Like they get that position done and over with, and they hammer it out real quick, and he's QB2, and that's a scary proposition. If you're starting out a super flex where quarterbacks are dominant, and here you go, you have 2 top 10 quarterbacks to anchor your team, it can cover up a lot of sins later on in the draft.
Yeah, I think, there's nothing that tells me that he won't be, as productive, combined yards, right? And there's nothing that says that he's not going to be as productive this year as he was last year. So maybe it is a few more passing yards and a few less rushing yards, and maybe it's a few more passing touchdowns than it is rushing touchdowns, which probably negligible over the course of the season. But depending on your league type, how many points you get for a passing touchdown versus points you get for a rushing touchdown, that could be something over the course of a season, right? But week to week, you're going to get good points out of him. So I agree. He's not Lamar Jackson. He's not Kyler, when it comes to the combined numbers, but he is still exciting. And if you are one of those players that takes the route that Kevin's talking about, and you've got him as your second quarterback, like, how much fun! Like, it's just fun.
Well, I tell you what, points per drop back, right? I'd rather have Hurts than Kyler.
Yep. Well, he outperformed him last year as well.
Yeah, I mean,
Sure.
You think of Kyler Murray in this high-powered Arizona offense, but Nuke Hopkins is out, right? You are trying to shuffle around that offense a little bit. They ran the ball better than anybody anticipated last year with kind of the resurgence of James Conner. I think that changes slightly this year as the defense, I believe, is going to take a step back after they kind of retooled some things on that side of the ball. But I have no issues. It makes for a healthy debate for people to take Jalen Hurts over Kyler Murray or vice versa. I think most people get a little scared and they take Kyler based off the name value. But if you're looking at, how that looks in points per drop back, Jalen Hurts is actually the smarter play because he's using his legs more efficiently than what Kyler is. And that's been the knock on him so far, is Kyler wants to be a quarterback so bad that he forgets that he is dynamic with his legs. And you saw that towards the end of the season. Teams weren't afraid of Kyler running anymore. They knew he wasn't going to. So they just dropped, they're dropping 8 and rushing 3. And Kyler was lost at times last year towards the last few weeks of the season because teams just were not afraid of him busting loose and gaining yards on the ground.
Well, and it's not often that you see a quarterback sneak, get 10 rushing touchdowns in there. Jalen Hurts did it. I believe one of the last ones to do that before that was Cam Newton back when he was in an MVP type of season. Like, it's not very often that we see running backs get double-digit touchdowns on the ground. I'd have to look up and see what Lamar did his MVP season there. But, for fantasy purposes, I absolutely love Jalen Hurts on my roster. I have several dynasty rosters where I have both him and Kyler as my 1-2 punch there. And you're able to put together some other just very spectacular and amazing things there. But, and I'm looking at even Lamar, even when Lamar had his, phenomenal seasons there running the ball, he only got to 7 rushing touchdowns there. So 10 rushing touchdowns really is truly remarkable there, which leads me into kind of my next thought as far as Jalen Hurts goes. Wouldn't surprise me to see a little bit of regression come as far as touchdowns on the ground there. 10, an incredibly high number. But that being said, the rest of the passing work there's room for that to come up to make up the difference on that there as well. Right there, we're seeing several reports come out of Eagles camp and Eagles beat writers saying that Jalen Hurts has improved his throwing motion. It looks more fluid. And hopefully Nick Sirianni and that being that kind of offensive guy there can come in and continue to work with him and set the set the offense up for him. But I do think that Jalen Hurts easily outperforms his ADP. And to your point, Kevin, where you're talking about Kyler and Jalen Hurts there, Jalen Hurts certainly has the better value as far as ADP goes. He's going about a round later, 12 picks later than what Kyler's going right now. So I think I'd rather take the value and load up at another position in the 5th round instead of the 6th round type of thing. So, guys, any other thoughts on Jalen Hurts or the Eagles? Alrighty, let's go ahead and head into our next team of the night. The Pittsburgh Steelers finished 9-7-1. They had a 62% pass, 38% run ratio, 21st in total points for, 23rd in total yards for. Head coach Mike Tomlin, the offensive coordinators Matt Canada. We're going to go ahead and head into the running back room. Najee Harris finished running back 4 last year, 307 rush attempts, 1,200 yards, 7 TDs, 74 receptions on 94 targets, 467 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Thoughts on Najee Harris?
Love him. I mean, first round. He's a first round running back, right? So he's a guy that, depending on how the board falls, Jonathan Taylor's going 1, and then you're seeing things shake up a little bit, right? Is it in redraft formats? Is it Dalvin Cook? Is it Derrick Henry? Some people are still in love with Christian McCaffrey. God only knows why. That type of thing. But, Najee, if you're sitting in the middle of the first round, I'm sorry, I've been playing so much super flex, I'm thinking back in. But if you're sitting in the middle of the first round, you're hoping Najee falls, right? Like you're hoping someone takes Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson, something like that, and kind of pushes those running backs down the board a little bit to you, because then you can smash yes and move on. Lots of usage. I see that continuing. Obviously, Pittsburgh's still working on their offensive line. They have quarterback questions, right, that we'll get to here later on. But Najee he's the most sure thing on this Pittsburgh offense right now. And so if you're looking for running back and you're sitting in the, front half of a single quarterback league, he is absolutely a guy that I'm targeting if I know I can't get my hands on Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, cosign. I mean, if you're drafting in the first round and he's still there for you, I mean, obviously after the first couple, he's a no doubt draft move on.
Yes, absolutely.
That was one. I'm calling that one.
I couldn't get the unmute to work, but we figured it out eventually. Yes, no, absolutely. Najee Harris is a draft guy. Draft him in the first round and set it and forget it running back there. Hyper. He really is the epitome of you don't necessarily need to be super efficient when you get a ton of volume, right? Like 400 opportunities last year for 400 plus opportunities for Najee Harris, and absolutely went to work and finished with running back 4. Still a lot of question marks along this Pittsburgh offensive line, questions at the quarterback position, but again, I think he's just going to get the volume to point himself up there into a pretty easy top 10 finish for you. Any other thoughts on Najee or any running backs that we want to mention besides Najee Harris?
No, he's kind of the one and only show in this town.
Alrighty, heading right into the wide receiver room. Diontae Johnson finished wide receiver 9 last year, 107 receptions, 169 targets, 1,161 yards, 8 touchdowns, 25.88% of the target share. Thoughts on Diontae Johnson?
For the most part, he was Ben Roethlisberger's security blanket, right? And they used Diontae Johnson a lot as an extension of the pass or the running game, which is why they had a 65% or 67%, passing breakdown. So I think we see some regression here. I don't think we see that type of usage coming from either Mitch Trubisky or Kenny Pickett. So I think he's going to take a step back. I think they're going to utilize a little bit of – it's going to be spread out a little bit more evenly, right, between Johnson and George Pickens, Chase Claypool, and Pat Freiermuth. So you're going to see that diversified a little bit more. That defense is still elite, so they're going to be able to lean on the running game late in games in a lot of different situations to kind of bleed out the clock and help them out. So – he's a guy that I'm not necessarily looking to draft this year, right? Like I'm kind of letting him pass me by. I think I can find some value in other places besides going for, in theory, the top offense of a team where I'm not quite sure what this passing game is going to look like here this season. So I'm fading Diontae Johnson this season.
Yeah, this one's tough because obviously they do have, a major change at the most important position there at quarterback. So you kind of have to take all of last year's stats and just flush them away because this team is going to have, not only is it going to look different, on the field, but I think it takes on a different identity too, because Ben Roethlisberger was such a, he was a leader of that team, and his personality is what reflected on that team. The what's the word I'm looking for? Like, just the will to keep playing. That was, Ben Roethlisberger was a warrior out there and would play through injuries and would continue to just, will his team. So, and I think guys really responded to that. So who knows what that's going to look like. So with Diontae Johnson, obviously it's hard to say what the future looks like because we don't have a reliable pass to base it on. Mitch Trubisky, we do have some idea. Kenny Pickett, we have no idea what he's like as an NFL quarterback. So this is interesting. It's a little scary, and it's scary enough for me to also kind of take the pass, and talk myself into other options, when they're coming up and I'm on the clock. So it's a very, very tricky situation. I think it is buyer beware when it comes to drafting some of these receivers in Pittsburgh. At the right price, I think they're worth it because I think they're talented enough that they can, overcome some of that. But man, it is tough for me. So I would lean pass, but there's a point where it's an inevitable and you have to take him.
Yeah, I mean, he's a pass for me simply from the standpoint of where he's going. He's coming off the board at the 38th overall pick. Yeah, that's going to be a pass that just gets into the too rich for my blood type of thing, especially when I start looking at it. I've got Jalen Waddle going behind him, Terry McLaurin, Michael Pittman Jr., DJ Moore, a guy that I would rather have certainly going a full round later on that one. Diontae Johnson, Kevin hit it really, really well when he said that, he was the security blanket. That was absolutely the case. And it's one of those two that while he had the wide receiver 9 overall finish for fantasy last year, it really was a deceptive 9 because it was all about just kind of consistency, but it wasn't tight wide receiver 1 consistency. It was wide receiver 2 week over week over week over week, because when you look at it, right, he only had 3 finishes inside the top 12 for fantasy last year: weeks 4, week 6, week 13. The rest, most of the rest of those finishes were right around wide receiver 19, 17, 20. And a lot of those just kind of going on there where he finished very firmly in a wide receiver 2, consistently week in, week out. And again, I don't think that that's really going to change. I think that consistency actually fluctuates more so to the point where you will overdraft Diontae Johnson this year. If you're taking him coming off the board at wide receiver 13, I think he probably finishes closer to wide receiver 21, 22 in that range when it's all said and done there. So that's a pass for me on a Diontae Johnson. Chase Claypool, wide receiver 37 last year, 59 receptions, 105 targets, 860 yards, 2 touchdowns, 16.08% of the target share. Thoughts on Chase Claypool?
If they can get his red zone efficiencies up, I think this might be the guy you see take a bit of a step up, right? Only 2 touchdowns for Chase Claypool is ridiculous. I mean, the guy stands head and shoulders above everybody else on the field. Obviously, he's a deep play threat at all times. Roethlisberger just couldn't get it down the field, which is part of the problem that we had with Chase Claypool. So whether it is Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett, like both those guys have a better arm than what Roethlisberger did at the end of his career. So I do think some more of those chances arise. You're getting a pretty good discount on Chase Claypool at this point as well, especially compared to where you're getting Diontae Johnson. So I don't know. I'm not searching after him, right? But if I'm building my roster and he happens to fall into the right position where I can use him as whether it's a flex option or just a depth piece at wide receiver, that's more where I'm looking at Chase Claypool. I'm not looking at him as an option to start at wide receiver 2 on my roster, or even wide receiver 3 given a choice.
I agree with that. Again, it's going to be tough because we just don't know what this team's identity is going to be. Obviously, we know that Najee Harris is going to be. I think that they will use the run to set up the pass to protect the quarterbacks, which means that few and far in between. I shouldn't say few and far in between, but less options for these receivers. So I think. Again, he should be better, but it is what it is. He doesn't really have a Hall of Fame quarterback throwing to him, at least not right now. I'm not saying that Mitch Trubisky is going to get in the Hall of Fame, but we don't know about Kenny Pickett, so it's just different. And to me, that risk that's too much of a risk for me.
Actually, I think all the risk is pretty well taken out of it when you factor in his ADP coming off the board at like 110. That puts him in that kind of 11th to 12th, kind of that, kind of in that 10th round type of range there for me. And at a double-digit pick, I'll spend up on a guy that could go out there and win me a week. Coming off the board, wide receiver 41. You're probably drafting him at his floor there. I'll take a shot, and I wouldn't have a problem necessarily drafting a Chase Claypool. If I'm looking for wide receiver in the 10th round, guys that I would be looking at and around there would be guys like Robert Woods going off the board a little bit before him, Treylon Burks, those kind of guys. Christian Kirk's in that range there as well. Kadarius Toney. I would probably go with a Chase Claypool because I think he gets you better upside there as well. So, that's kind of where I would lean and go, and I certainly don't have a problem shooting a shot on him in the 10th round there. George Pickens, the rookie, picked in the 2nd round, pick 55 from the University of Georgia. Thoughts on George Pickens?
I really like George Pickens. I watched a lot of his games. Obviously, the knee injury kind of set him back a little bit, but man, his rookie season, he looked like he had all the pieces. Right, he is a guy who can play outside, so it's going to be interesting to see what the Steelers actually do with their wide receiver formations. Right, because in all reality, Diontae Johnson should be the slot guy now, right? Claypool's a little bit too big to play in the slot. Pickens could, but he didn't do that in college. He was outside the numbers. He's a true X-type receiver. A big body guy, does well with contested catches, can move his body around, runs a really good route, and for all intents and purposes, has recovered extremely well from the ACL injury. Now, there were a couple situations that came up that probably led to his draft stock sliding a little bit, whether it was personal decisions or whatever that the NFL teams kind of caught wind of. So we'll see how that translates. I hope it's just noise and he's able to shake that loose, because while I think Chris Olave is the best receiver in this draft class, I do think George Pickens has the ability to have the best career and have the most statistical prowess, if you will, amongst these receivers. So it's going to be interesting to see how this shakes out, because I really like the kid. I'm grabbing him in Dynasty in a whole lot of different places, especially in Dynasty startups, because where people are drafting him in rookie drafts compared to where you can get him in like a Dynasty startup, there is a huge advantage to picking him up in a dynasty startup. You were getting like 6 rounds worth of value by being able to pick him up there, as opposed to the back end of the first round or the beginning of the second in a rookie draft. So a little bit of food for thought there, depending on how your situation's playing out. But I do like the kid. I'm excited to see what he can do, and watch him make some noise there in the Steel City.
I got nothing. Again with the Pittsburgh receiving room. I'm all over the place still.
Now, what did it for me was the fact that you unmuted yourself to give a hand motion, for your patented cosign type of thing, to then mute yourself again. Like, for those of you listening to it, then didn't get to see that. And even for those of you watching on YouTube, you didn't get to see Alex unmute himself to give the hand gesture to mute himself again. Just cracked me up. So, Kevin, I think you hit the nail on the head very well there, right? George Pickens is a guy that I think will have a tremendous career. I don't know that it necessarily translates to this season on that one, right? There's too many question marks at the quarterback position, guys that are going around his similar drafts, draft price in an ADP for a redraft type of thing. I probably will lean a little bit different there, right? Tim Patrick's going right around that same type of realm. Christian Watson going right around the same realm. Albert Okwuegbunam is going around that same type of realm. And all of those guys, I think, have a little bit, can have a little bit more consistency. And if I need to, fill in for a week type of thing, I think that they provide me a little bit more floor there on that one. But George Pickens coming off the board incredibly late, 173rd overall, the overall wide receiver 59, which kind of puts him down there in almost undrafted territory for redraft. So I'm probably just adding him to a watch list and seeing how that one goes. Although I know if I'm playing in a league with Kevin, he's going to take him with that last pick. So won't be on the waiver wire to watch. But in any league that doesn't have Kevin in it, I'm okay to do that with. So, alrighty, let's go ahead and head on over into the tight end room here. Pat Freiermuth, tight end 13, 60 receptions, 79 targets, 497 yards, 7 touchdowns, 12.1% of the target share. Thoughts on Pat Freiermuth?
I'm really surprised to see that he finished outside of tight end 1. Right? Like, it just felt like he was more impactful than that last year. Probably in large part due to the 7 touchdowns, right? He kept filling up the stat sheet in that regard. And so you're thinking you're getting some more bang for your buck. I think my expectation is slight progression, right? Maybe a couple more yards, maybe 1, maybe 2 less touchdowns, something like that, but kind of balances out. I see him finishing at like tight end 10, but I think that's lower than what his ADP is, honestly. I think he's coming off the board at tight end 8 or 9 here at the moment, Derek, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, but it seems like he's being drafted a little bit higher than where I have him slated, but he is a good tight end. He's a really good young tight end. So in Dynasty, that's invaluable. You're always looking for that piece. So that way you're not just playing scrubs. In redraft leagues, again, he's kind of in that third wave, much like Dallas Goedert. I would rather have Goedert, but Pat Freiermuth, if he happened to slip and Goedert went right before me or around before when I wanted to take him, I could settle in on that, and I think I'd be okay. I'd just probably look to grab a second tight end in deep leagues a little bit sooner if that were the case. But guy has great hands, has a nose for the end zone. I think he's going to be a good security blanket for Trubisky or Kenny Pickett. So there's going to be some built-in value there as he kind of takes some of that the junk, right, the muck in the middle of the field, because Claypool, Pickens, and even Diontae Johnson, for a large part, that's not really their game, right? Diontae Johnson's more of a slant guy, kind of make his moves. Claypool's your deep threat. He's running, your deep ins, your deep outs. We'll see how they use George Pickens, but Freiermuth, he kind of fills in that void in the middle there. So it's going to be interesting to see how they deploy him, but I'm not going to be afraid to take him, as the 10th, 11th, 12th, whatever tight end off the board if he falls that late. But I'm not going to reach much higher than that. I'm not going to take him as the 6th, 7th, 8th guy off the board. I'm waiting for 9, 10, 11, that type of range.
Yeah, I think a big factor is how soon does Kenny Pickett, does Kenny Pickett play this year? How soon does Kenny Pickett play this year? Does he have, the chemistry with Freiermuth? Obviously Trubisky's going to have to develop that too. But, young quarterback best friend is a good pass catching tight end, and that, Pat Freiermuth fits the bill there. So I think his finish largely depends on how quickly Pittsburgh moves to Pickett. And I think that you see, I think that could have a big impact on where he finishes. Otherwise, what you see is what you get, right? Like, he finished tight end 13 last year, the 7 touchdowns, the yards that he had. I agree with you, Kevin. I feel like more yards, maybe fewer touchdowns if it's Trubisky the whole way. If it's Pickett, who knows? Wild card could be a lot more yards and maybe the same amount of touchdowns. If that's how it shakes out. So he is a what you see is what you get tight end. To your point, Kevin, you should not reach on him. Don't try to turn Pat Freiermuth into something that he isn't. And just be patient. And if he falls to you, he falls to you. But there's other good tight ends that are going around there too that you don't need to reach to get Pat Freiermuth. Just make sure that you understand that what you see is what you get.
Yeah, Pat Freiermuth is very consistent as far as the tight end goes, right? Like through the first half of the season, he was 7.8 points per game and half-point PPR scoring. Second half of the season, he was 7.5 points per game in half-point PPR scoring, and just was very consistent all the way through to week to get you to tight end 13. And really a lot of that had to do with the fact of when they got in the red zone, like that was the guy that Ben Roethlisberger looked at, and definitely, caught every one of his touchdowns inside of the red zone, with the majority of those coming in the 5 zone. So the very, very valuable targets there. That was where when they got inside the 5-yard line and Ben Roethlisberger was dropping back, that was the guy that he was throwing the ball to, and really hyper targeting there, and he caught him. So yeah, there's a lot to be said about that there was some chemistry there. Big Ben has definitely likes using a tight end. We saw that throughout his career, him use a tight end, especially down inside the red zone in that 5 zone type of area. Mitch Trubisky has also very much liked using a tight end when they get inside the red zone there as well. You think about all of the years that he and Jimmy Graham played together, and Jimmy Graham always managed to get some fantasy relevancy just because he caught 6-7 touchdowns type of thing. So Mitch Trubisky will, I think, continue to look that way should they get into the red zone there. Same thing too with Kenny Pickett. I think that he will be kind of the safety blanket there for either one of those quarterbacks. So I think he'll get some good use. And Kevin, he is coming off the board right now at tight end number 10 overall. So kind of right in that range you're talking about, puts him in a 9th round type of pick, mid to back half of the 9th round there. So I think there's a ton of value for Pat Freiermuth. What'll be interesting to see is, again, it just speaks to the fact that Big Ben had a very shallow depth of target there, from the standpoint that he only had about an 8.2% yards per reception on, over the course of last year. So, again, that speaks to the fact of how they were using that. I think that you could see that tick up to the point where you probably see him closer to 600 yards and probably 5 or 6 touchdowns here, with a similar type of overall positional finish there. Kind of right there. You're drafting what you get, to your point there, Alex. Let's go ahead and head on into the QB room. Mitch Trubisky really didn't play much last year. Came in a couple of reliefs of Josh Allen over there in Buffalo. So we're not even bother read the stats, but thoughts on Mitch Trubisky?
Right now, for all intents and purposes, leading the quarterback competition in Pittsburgh. I think short term he gives them the best opportunity to win, right, and to kind of continue their winning culture. and stand to make a run at the playoffs again, I'm going to tell you that he had to have learned something in Buffalo, right? And I think that it was for the good, a reset, get out of Chicago. That was becoming a little toxic for him. Spend some time in Buffalo, learn under
Dable.
Yes, Dable and with Josh Allen. So I think Trubisky's actually going to use his legs more than what we expect. Like, I expect his rushing yards to be kind of a sneaky surprise there. So I know right now he's going super late as far as quarterbacks go. Not that I would want to run him out as my everyday starter, but if you're playing in a deep league and you want just a backup quarterback on your roster, I think he's kind of worth the flyer in super flex leagues. I don't know that I'm quite comfortable saying I'm good with him being my QB2, but I really like him as a QB3 to kind of see how that offense develops. Maybe you can get the matchups right. And if you see that he is using his legs a bit more and his efficiency, if his completion percentage, is up at that, 67 to 69% range, and, he's throwing the ball 30 to 35 times a game, it might be a little much for what they're going to have him do, but they can't have Najee do everything. So he's going to have to throw the ball a little bit, even if it is that short passing game. So I think there's sneaky upside with Trubisky. Again, I'm not saying he's going to light the world on fire. I'm not saying he's going to be an MVP, but I do think there's sneaky value because I do honestly believe he's going to use his legs more than anybody believes. And that's going to naturally give him a higher floor than a lot of quarterbacks that you're drafting that late for your third super flex quarterback or a really late backup quarterback in a single QB deep league.
I like that. I like the phrase sneaky upside because I think that is what Mitch Trubisky is this year. It all depends on how long he continues to run out there. I think you're right, Kevin. I think that it's a humbling experience when you go from being a first round quarterback to a backup role on a winning team too. He learned how to win. I think or hopefully he learned how to win. At least he was around it there in Buffalo. So I think that experience is invaluable. It's a tough experience for a lot of these young quarterbacks that go in the first round because they don't go to winning cultures. They go to try and build a winning culture, which is a lot harder than just stepping into one, which is the benefit that the next guy does have is that he's stepping into a winning culture and understands what it takes to be, consistent in this league. So I like Trubisky where you're saying, Kevin, maybe is that QB3 in a super flex. He's definitely not, anybody that I would take in a single quarterback league. But, somebody to, I tell you what, I'd rather have Mitch Trubisky than Drew Lock at this point. Like that's, obviously I think anybody would have a 2x4 instead of Drew Lock at this point. But I do think that, he does have sneaky value. How long that value lasts before they hand the keys over to Kenny Pickett, that's to be seen. But maybe you can get something out of him while he is. I anticipate him to be the week one starter. I think that's what's going to happen unless something drastic happens over the next 2 months. But I think he's the week one starter, and I think you can ride that for as long as Pittsburgh rides that.
Over under 23.5 total touchdowns for Mitch Trubisky.
Taking the over.
I would go the under. Total. Yeah, I'm still under.
Like I want to take the under, but I think it's the over on this one. I think that Mitch Trubisky, short of Pittsburgh coming out and just being a dumpster fire, I think he starts the whole season when it's all said and done. I really do. I think they're going to use him as a bridge quarterback. And I think he understands too, that ultimately while he signed a 2-year deal in Pittsburgh, their dead cap hit on him next year is not that much. So I think he understands that ultimately he's playing for a contract here. And, like we always say, guys in contract years, what that truly looks like. So I think that he will end up starting all season long. I think that he will have a pretty decent season. I think probably 24 and 24, 25 TDs and probably 12, 13 interceptions, somewhere around about 3,500 yards when it's all said and done. I could very easily see that being the case for him.
So QB 20?
I don't know that he fully makes it up to QB 20, but I'm saying right there back in QB 2, QB 24 would not surprise me. So I can see, and right now he's coming off the board at QB 33. So I think he'll return value on that. He is not going to be drafted in most formats and in most leagues. So he's a guy worth keeping an eye on, putting a star next to, especially if you're doing, quarterback by committee or a streaming QB type of strategy for a single QB league there. And worth keeping an eye on even for your super flexes there as well. Because again, I think he has some sneaky upside, and I think you're right, Kevin. I think he does put a few more miles on those tires than he had before this season as well. So, I think they're truly going to use a bridge quarterback here in Pittsburgh, and they've got Mike Tomlin has got to try and put together a non-losing season, being the only head coach to go this far into it without a losing record in his coaching tenure. So.
I think the better question is over under number of starts, and I would put that at 13.5.
I'll take over.
I'll take over.
I just said he's starting the whole season.
Yeah. All right. Fair enough.
I think so too. I don't see them. Pittsburgh is not the type of franchise that's going to rush into starting a quarterback that they don't think is 110% ready. Mitch Trubisky allows them to do that for this entire season and then bring back the quarterback competition next year, make everybody prove it again, see what steps Kenny Pickett has taken. And they got 5 years on Pickett, right? I mean, that's part of why you draft quarterbacks in the first round. So even if you have him develop for 2 years, worst case scenario, you still have him develop for 2 years, but he's been around that organization for, at that point, 30 months, damn near, by the time they get into training camp and everything else, and really understands what it takes in that culture that Pittsburgh cultivates. So I don't see there being any reason that Mitch doesn't start every game this season, barring injury, much like what Derek said.
Yeah. Very good. Let's go ahead and head on into the rookie here, which, we might have just, stolen our own thunder heading here, but Kenny Pickett is the rookie, drafted first round, pick 20 by Pittsburgh, from Pittsburgh. Thoughts on Kenny Pickett?
He was doing some decent things in OTAs and mandatory minicamp, but for a lot of that, he was playing with the third stringers, guys. Like if you're reading the beat writers and hearing what they have to say, he didn't take a single snap with first team. A single snap. Now, dynasty leagues, I understand why you want to draft him and why you kind of want to stash him away and see what you can get out of it, because quarterbacks are a necessity. You absolutely have to have them. But in a redraft format, no thank you. I'm going to pass, and we'll just keep an eye on what's going on in the news. And, if push comes to shove and you got to throw some fab down on it, then so be it. I'm willing to take that gamble.
I would agree.
Again, Kevin, you summed it up too well for the rest of us to put our 2 cents on. But no, I think you're right. I think Kenny Pickett sits this year, and we'll see what he does next year. And I've seen the same reports that you were seeing, that he has yet to take a first team snap, and it's all been relegated to kind of that third string, third team type of deal there. So very interesting to see, and we'll see what that comes. But here's the most interesting thing that I've seen out there is the fact that Kenny Pickett is actually coming out the board much higher than Mitch Trubisky is as far as redraft ADP goes, coming off the board at QB 27, whereas Mitch Trubisky coming off the board at QB 33. And for everybody drafting him over Mitch Trubisky in redrafts, I think you're doing it wrong. Just my 2 cents on it. So.
It's the whole Trey Lance, Jimmy G thing from last year, right?
Exactly.
Like everyone rushed out to draft Trey Lance. And yeah, you got a little bit of value out of him. He made his couple starts, and one of them really made his footprint known, and then the other one he was just kind of ho hum. But there's no reason for it. There's no reason for it, especially in redraft leagues. Like, don't waste the roster spot.
Absolutely. Well, guys, that takes us down to the end of the Steelers. Any final thoughts on the Steelers?
No, they'll be pushing for division title again. I don't see why they won't. That division does a good job of kind of cannibalizing itself. It's a tough division. We'll see what happens with Deshaun Watson in games that he plays or doesn't play this season as things kind of continue to progress. His trial started today, if I'm not.
His league hearing started today.
Yeah.
And so meeting with that, they adjourned for the day. There wasn't a ton of news that came out. Looks like they'll pick that up tomorrow. So I'm sure by the time we go live next week, we'll have more details on that.
Yeah. So other than that, it's going to be a competitive division. Arguably the second closest division outside of, or the second most competitive division outside of the AFC West, arguably. Mm-hmm. But Pittsburgh, that defense will carry them through some of this, right? This defense is really, really, really good. As much as it probably pains people to say, Mitch Trubisky is an upgrade over Ben Roethlisberger last year. So it's just putting those pieces together to give them a little bit more consistency on offense and seeing how it shakes out.
Yeah, it should be a good team again. I mean, it's the Steelers, and it would be hard to see the Steelers be bad.
Yeah, they definitely do a good job as far as a franchise and running an organization there. Alrighty, guys. Well, that takes us to the end of the Steelers. Any final thoughts out there for the viewers and the listeners?
We are now in the dog days of summer. So no more hockey, no more basketball, regular season baseball. I'm sure there's some of you who care. I don't. So time to dive in, right? Time to really get honed in on what these beat writers are having to say, what some of these reports mean. Obviously, we'll be working on player rankings, have a bunch of fun stuff heading towards the website, draft analysis, team breakdowns, all that good stuff. So stay tuned to the Good Old Boys Network across all of our social platforms that Derek will plug. But thanks for tuning in, y'all. We'll see you next week.
Go Avs.
I like it. All righty, y'all. Make sure that you're hitting up the socials, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at Good Old. Oh, I forgot TikTok at Good Old Boys FF. Make sure you're giving us a follow. And again, best way to support this independent podcast, head over to YouTube, click the subscribe button, and closing in on the 400 followers and subscribers over there. So thank you to everybody doing that. We're continuing that march and hope that you join us there. But that's going to do it for the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. He's Kevin. He's Alex. I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe.